Welcome to another edition of Believe in Giants. Bob Papa, two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks. Giants get their first win of the year. They do it in Cleveland against the Browns, and really it was a pretty cool effort, Carl, considering the game started in the worst-case scenario way it could start. You fumble the opening kickoff, and in one play, Amari Cooper has a 24-yard touchdown catch. Place is going nuts. Cooper had gone the last two games where he didn't have over 20 yards receiving in each of the games. One play, he's got it, boom. And you're like, oh, this is going to be a long day. But it wasn't. Why?
They played complimentary football, number one. Number two, it spoke to their resilience. I guess the wake-up call was the Minnesota game where they just didn't compete. It seems like, when things went bad in the Minnesota game, they did nothing to turn it around. And I made that obvious, and I think they kind of looked at the film and saw that. And so here they are faced with a similar situation early in the game, basically the first play of the game, and they just went about their business. They went about saying, okay, we have a plan. Let's go execute. It's one score. It's still early. And they came out offensively. I think they were as dominant as I've seen them in years. I think Brian Daboll called an excellent game. He took the stinger out of Schwartz. He's a very aggressive defensive play caller, and, they like to get after it. He took the stinger right out. He had some plays that just put them on their heels right away, and his defense could never really recover from that.
The Giants did something yesterday, Carl, that was pretty impressive. When was the last time that you can remember, because I can't remember it, where the Giants had a drive that ended in a touchdown in which they committed not one but two offensive holding calls in the drive? But they did yesterday.
Yeah. Listen, it never happens in Giants football. It's been quite a long time, but, the holding calls, one was on Myles Garrett, probably a necessary hold to keep your quarterback, healthy for the rest of the game. But this team was locked in. It was very refreshing to see. Both sides of the football, they complemented each other, and they had a masterful game plan. Shane Bowen had a great game plan. They ended up with 8 sacks on the day. But for the most part, that game probably couldn't or should not have been as close as it was had it been for maybe 3 or 4 plays. I mean, the Giants legitimately could have put 40 points on the board because they had 3 other touchdown opportunities that they just did not capitalize on.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what could have been, right? I mean, start of the third quarter, Singletary fumbles on a drive that you just felt like the Giants had the Browns completely off balance. Then they run a go route on the next series. Nabers gets overthrown. Then later in that drive, they try the same thing. Ball goes through his hands. He has Wandell on a slant that if he gets it on him, I know he had to sidearm it and kind of get rid of it just out in front of him. That's probably splitting the defense and going the distance.
And let's not forget, Brian Burns dropped what would have been a pick 6.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally, I think, where he's on like the 30-yard line when the ball he catches that ball, he's walking into the end zone.
The 8 sacks in the game, the most that the Giants have had in a game since they beat the Tennessee Titans in 2014. I mean, they got after it. They're only the fourth team since sacks became a stat to have 9 different players record at least a half a sack in a game. And I think that's kind of cool, right? In the sense that it's very you're not just relying on 1 or 2 guys, right? They're playing a system of defense where everybody, as they say, can eat. I'm pretty impressed with the way it kind of came together.
Yeah.
They were going.
Yeah, so, you're early in the season, and, by this week, it shouldn't look like it did week 1. And it just shows that, you have a group that actually cares, that do believe they are better than what they have put out there. And it came together yesterday. And listen, they were fighting a team in their weight class. They stepped up and they were dominant for the most part of the game. Now, keep in mind also, this Cleveland Browns defense is just not some walk in the park. They've always been, over the past 4 or 5 years, a pretty high-ranked defense. And they were able to get some plays and move the football up and down the field on them. And, Daniel Jones did a really good job of managing the game. And when I say managing, means he operated without mistakes. He made great decisions with the football. And there's going to be, and there has already been folks that are saying, well, he's got Nabers and Nabers is bailing him out. Well, that's the point.
Yeah, exactly. Like Justin Jefferson bailed out Kirk Cousins many a time, and Jamar Chase bailed out Joe Burrow, and Kelsey bails out Mahomes.
So here's
that's
something
what elite players do.
Yeah.
That's why those teams have success. And when you don't have a great player that makes above X's and O's, you lose.
Right. So here's something that I want people to think about. And I want them to jog their memories and just go back as far as you need to go. And tell me of spectacular catches that were made on a perfect throw. Because if it's a perfect throw, there are no spectacular catches.
Exactly.
Think about it. Think about it, folks. Spectacular catches normally come from an imperfect throw or an imperfect situation. So when you talk about Daniel Jones and as it relates to Malik Nabers, yeah, that's why he's here. Now, if you want to talk about some things that Jones could have done better, which I think he will, is he's got to calibrate his verticals, his long balls. And it's not that he can't do it, because he's always been a pretty good long ball thrower. He's pretty good in vertical offense. He's got to get that calibrated. And I think that's all part of the process of him coming back. But he had some overthrows, and he had a layup in the end zone to the tight end that he overthrew. He had a go route that he overthrew. He led Jalen Hyatt too far. But those aren't concerns to me, right? Because he operated the offense. He made great decisions with the football. And if we were talking about, if there were no proof of Daniel Jones being able to throw vertical footballs with accuracy, then I'd say that's a concern, because they can't open up the offense like they want. But that's not the case. If you go back and look at his tape, he's always been a really good vertical passer. So I just think this is part of the comeback process, and he'll get that calibrated, and you'll start to see even more explosive plays.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last year in Arizona, right? The second half, he came out bombing away and hit Hyatt on the big pass play. And I remember one year when they opened against Pittsburgh, he hit Slayton on a deep ball, beautifully thrown ball. I mean, you're right. I think all these quarterbacks, whether it's Rodgers, whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Daniel Jones, any of these guys that are coming off what was season-ending injuries that required a major surgery, I think we're all seeing them at different points in times get better and get better, right? And they're getting better and they're a little more comfortable. I think one of the things that, Carl, we have to talk about, I was talking with John Schmelk about this. When you go back and you look at the coaches' tape, look, the O-line gave up more pressures in this game than they gave up, I think, in the first two games combined. And look, Washington doesn't have a good pass rushing unit, and Minnesota's defense is built more on design and confusion. They don't have a Myles Garrett or Zadarius Smith or this week Micah Parsons and a DeMarcus Lawrence. But I thought Jones did a really good job in this game of creating some more time, moving within the pocket, and then standing in there. The one touchdown pass to Nabers. And I was talking to one of our cameramen, Chris Pett, whose job was on the one touchdown pass to Nabers, his job was to ISO Daniel Jones, not follow the ball. I guess NFL Films was going to follow the ball, and in the highlight stuff, they'll use the films catch part of it. But his job was to just frame up Daniel Jones on the play. And he's like, dude, he goes, I can't believe he got up. He got walloped in throwing the touchdown pass. He goes, I thought they broke him. And it says to me a lot, too, about his comfort level now of trusting that in week one, we saw him seeing like ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in week two, again, not under heavy pressure, slowed it down. And in week three, against a team that got hits on him and got pressure on him, that he didn't get into all that panicky stuff. And I'm sure on the sights and sounds or the Giant highlights, they're going to show it. But he got absolutely blasted and made a good throw.
Yeah, and then he gets up and he operates. It didn't impact him because it wasn't a lot of those. Like last year, every other pass play, he was getting walloped, right? A quarterback, he's going to take some shots, but they get up and they operate. But when they are expecting to get hit all the time and there's no trust in the offensive line, then that's where bad decision-making comes in. But if I can just switch really quick and we can get back to this point, Bob, I want to talk about defense, a defensive player who I called out for the obvious for being inconsistent. That's Cor'Dale Flott. And if I can say the things that I said last week, I need to say what I need to say this week. The kid was locked in. Yeah, he had one missed tackle. He was aggressive. He played, I don't know how many tackles he had. It had to be close to 10 tackles. He played a magnificent game. That's the Cor'Dale Flott that they have always looked forward to. That's the guy that they want on the field. And that young man balled out yesterday. He played a magnificent game. And, I'm going to give him all the credit that he deserves. And I hope that this is just the beginning of what Cor'Dale Flott is in terms of realizing his potential, because he was a major contributor yesterday to the success of this defense.
And that's growth, right? That's what we're talking about. Is there growth? Is there, okay, here are mistakes that were made. Look, they were really good against the run yesterday. Now, no Nick Chubb. Their run game is not as good without Nick Chubb. But the Giants cut off the run, and guys like Flott and a host of others made the noticeable improvements. I mean, I thought, right, the gap integrity and all those other things that they talked about were much more disciplined yesterday. And I think it's something to build on. It's not like, okay, well, all right, we're all good here. There's plenty of things that you can look at and say, okay, we gotta tighten this up, we gotta tighten that up. But I think everybody's got to be a little bit encouraged by what they saw. Hey,
Sure.
just a note here: BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, number one source for everything football. Stat, matchup, live odds, spreads. BetOnline, bet on the games. Think you know your stuff? Get $200,000 in mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week. Your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When you finish with the game, head over to the online casino. Blackjack, poker, online with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Carl, I look at this game and I say, is this sort of the turning point for the Giants? I mean, they're going to have to play a game on Thursday night. We'll talk about that in the next pod. But from a team morale standpoint, to get this win and deal with the adversity that they dealt with, I think is going to go a long way in this team's confidence, especially for these young players.
I say yes and no to that. It's a confirmation of who they thought they were. It's a confirmation of the team who stood tall against one of the NFC's best in the Detroit Lions for a week. This is who they thought they were. So this is a confirmation. You got a lot of questions answered, if there were any internally, as to whether or not, they could do the right things to play at that level. I think if you want to say turning point, yeah, I think they're where they playing at a level that they thought they would be at. And so now it's just a matter, as competition gets harder, can you continue to play that at that level? Because there's always a path to victory. And as long as your best players are the best players, no matter who the opponent is, and your role players are attention to detail, you will have a path to victory. Now, what takes that away when you're fighting above your weight class are things like fumbles, turnovers, miscues on special teams, and inconvenient penalties, right? So when you're playing a good team, the margin of error is very, very slim. But that is part of their growth process. That's where they have to go now, right? If they want to go up in weight class during the course of this season, they will have to clean up some things, right? They had a few missed tackles, but they, as a team, I thought tackled well. And when I say as a team, they got more than one person to the football. That's why if a guy missed a tackle, the runner didn't get a lot of yards after contact. That is, good team defense. And that's how you eliminate missed tackles. And because if you got one guy who's got to make it and he doesn't do it and the guy's off and running, that's just not good team defense. You get a lot of guys to the football and good things happen. But again, as they go up in weight class, and there's some heavyweights on this schedule, your best players have to be your best players, no matter who they're playing against. Yesterday, their best players showed up. Defensively, Brian Burns wrecked the game for them. Kayvon Thibodeaux made some tremendous plays, a lot of plays that don't even go on the stat sheet, right? The key 4th down stop, that was him. Last week, he wouldn't have made that play. He was out of position. This week, he was in position. Not only was he in position, a 4th and 1, he stops it 2 yards short. Like that's big time play. It goes in to the stat sheet as a tackle, but the impact of that play changed a lot of things. The offensive football back. He was constantly in the backfield as well.
One more thought on Jones here, as far as trusting. You know, it also helps in the trust factor when you have an elite player like a Malik Nabers, as an example, and you are taking shots. And whereas last year he was just getting beaten, you know, so many no hitters, nobody could have made a play.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, you also gain confidence in your O line, where it's like, just give me that guys, just give me that
Mm-hmm.
half second, because I know when I throw it to him, we got a big play coming.
Sure.
You know, and that all of those things kind of add up to what turned out to be a very successful performance in Cleveland. All right, you got anything else that you want to get off your chest about this game?
No, I just, they just have to keep good going. That's really what it comes down to. Again, they're going to be facing some heavyweights, and it's going to come down to the little things. And that's going to be the penalties. You got to play kind of air free when you're playing these really talented football teams.
All right, we're going to come back on Wednesday, and we're going to give you a preview of the Cowboys. But as we like to say when we end it, Carl,
Tell a friend to tell a friend.
believe
Believe in
in
Giants.
Giants.